Today we're going to cover the top reasons why your winter sowing might end up in failure. As a bonus, you'll want to stick around to the end for my top 3 tips for winter sowing success. Spring is coming, so let's get it. Winter sowing is a simple and easy way to grow plants from seed, but sometimes things just don't work out. Either nothing sprouts, or maybe they sprout for a while and then disappear. We start out pretty optimistic. We invest in seeds, we find jugs, most of us buy our soil, and we spend time planting our seeds. Sometimes it's hard to imagine when you're working with tiny seeds what those seeds are really going to look like when they grow up to be plants. Sometimes we don't realize how big those root systems are going to be. The seeds might look so small it looks like they have plenty of room, but when they start growing you realize that they're soaking up a ton of water. Sometimes the roots get all tangled up at the bottom, they get root bound, and that's probably because there's not enough dirt. Plants need way more soil than I think, and 3 or 4 inches of soil is really the minimum. I can grow things in 2 inches of soil, but it really outgrows the container very fast. So the problem I have is they end up drinking up all the water and then the soil dries out. So I try to be as generous as possible with the amount of soil that I put in. The point of having the clear plastic dome over the seeds is because it acts like a greenhouse and it makes it warm inside. This causes the seeds to sprout a little bit early, which helps us get a jump on the season. Your seeds might not get the benefit of the greenhouse effect if the container isn't completely sealed. Sometimes the tape comes off or there's little gaps. Sometimes we come up with creative ways to seal it, but then it kind of doesn't work out very well, and there's still a lot of cold getting in from the side. That's why I use more tape than I think I need so that I don't have any gaps, and I can layer the tape in case it starts coming off in the rain and the snow. Where I live, the temperatures can be really hot one day and really cold the next day. If the temperature gets above 70 degrees, how hot do you think it is in those water bottles? It's probably above 90 degrees, and that would be fine for a mature plant, but for a seedling, that really doesn't work. It's just way too hot for seedlings to survive in above 90-degree temps. So too much sun on a hot day can really fry those seedlings. What you want to do is put them in the shade. That's why it's important to keep an eye on the weather forecast, and if you're going to have an unusually hot day, just take those bottles and put them right in the shade. That'll protect them from the hot sun. Later in the season, you can leave the plants in the sun, but open up the tops so that it doesn't have that greenhouse effect and cause it to be 95 degrees in the bottles. The problem with this is you're going to have to remember to close it at the end of the day, because in the spring in the north, it gets hot during the day and then it gets back down to freezing at night. If you don't close the bottle at night, you're going to get frozen seedlings. They can get really bad frost damage and then you have to start all over. These are mistakes that I've made a lot of times. It's kind of a pain to open and close them a lot, so if you don't have time for that, just keep these bottles in the shade and you're going to do just fine. If you're having a good time learning about this stuff, subscribing to the channel or leaving a comment really lets YouTube know there's an audience for this. I'm hoping to get 1,000 subscribers by the summer. Let's get back to it. The next mistake that leads to winter sowing failure might not be your fault, but there's one thing you can do to give yourself a better chance. Oh, this light is really bright. The holes at the top of the bottles are really good at letting water in, but if it rains too many days in a row, this can cause something called damping off. Damping off is a plant fungus that's already in the soil. When it's too wet in the bottle, they can activate and kill the seedlings. There's also other kinds of mold that are in there that can grow when it's too wet, so I would check on them regularly to make sure that they're draining well and not holding on to too much water. If they're too wet and you know that it's going to rain over the next few days, you can always cover them with a tarp, or if you've saved the bottle caps, you can put the caps back on while it's raining until it dries out. Winter sowing is an easy way to start seeds, and it's pretty hands-off, but nothing in the garden is set it and forget it. Everything takes some checking in on. If you've ignored your seedlings for a long time and then go to check on them, you might notice the water bottles are very light. Not heavy to pick up. This means they're dry and they might not have enough water. As time goes by, you'll want to check on your bottles at least once a week. Pick them up and see if they feel like they could use some water. And you can gently water them through the hole if necessary. A lot of seeds just won't sprout if the soil is too dry. This next tip seems to be obvious, but it does happen to almost everyone who tries winter sowing. You've got all your water bottles lined up outside. Each one is perfectly cared for and labeled. Then you go outside to check on them one morning and they've all blown away and they're all over the yard. Some of them look okay, some of them are on their side, but a few of them have kind of rolled around. Now the seeds are mixed up in the dirt. They're kind of buried too deep. It's really a bummer. I've definitely had this happen to me, which is why I put ours in our fire pit. Securing them on both sides is the only way to really make sure that they don't blow around. Maybe a fence on one side, maybe some bricks or wood or lawn furniture to kind of prevent them from blowing away on the other side. It's not the most attractive, but it definitely helps us avoid this devastating experience. When I look at stock photos of people planting seeds, it drives me crazy because if you're digging with a shovel and planting seeds in a hole and then shoveling a bunch of dirt back onto the seeds, you're not going to grow anything. This is how you plant potatoes. Small seeds do just fine scattered on the surface. For example, when I plant carrots, I don't even push them in the ground, they go right into the soil themselves. Native plants like bee balm or blue lobelia, cardinal flower, they don't have to be buried at all. Stop planting plants too deep. After talking about all these mistakes, let's bring it back and talk about some empowering things that we can do to have success with our winter sowing. Tip number 1, keep an eye on your plants. A lot of the problems that we've talked about today could be avoided just by going out there and taking a peek at your seedlings every once in a while. You'll learn which ones grow early, which ones take their time, which ones need more water, and if something goes wrong, you can rescue them before they melt and disappear. Tip number 2, if you have to leave them while you're going on vacation or you have a busy week, just put them in the shade. Make sure they have enough water and secure them with something so they don't blow away. Putting your winter sowing bottles in the shade will really prevent a lot of problems. So to make your life easier, if you're super busy, just put them in at least part shade. Tip number 3, learn about the different plants and their unique quirks. My native plants are tough and they don't come up unless they're really sure it's going to be nice out. But for example, zinnias are over-optimistic. As soon as it's 70 degrees in that little greenhouse, they start growing, but after that, they can easily die if temperatures get to be freezing or close to 85 degrees. So I know if I'm winter sowing zinnias, I have to keep an eye on them. If I'm winter sowing black-eyed Susans or penstemon, you really got to try to kill those. It's so helpful to know your plants. They're all different from each other. For example, onions and swamp milkweed have really tough roots, so you can grow them really close together and separate them out individually one by one. It's not unusual for me to grow 50 in a gallon jug. Snow peas and cucumbers don't like to be separated. They just don't like having their roots messed with. So I space them out in a way that you'll either plant the whole thing like one big plant or you make enough room so that it's easy to separate them. The best thing you can do to have success winter sowing is to stay connected to your plants. Watch them, see how they behave, see how they tolerate sun and transplanting, and you'll carry that knowledge with you into the next year, where you're going to have even better results. If you'd like to grow some pretty cool native plants from seed, you can check out this video.